What's up everyone, Tara Roberts here with Fantasy Pros bringing you my top 10 waiver wire ads for week 15. Before I get into the list, if you want a chance to win a glorious fantasy football championship belt for your league, courtesy of our good friends at Trophy Smack, the #1 destination for epic fantasy football trophies, you need to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now. Drop a comment below on this video and that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can know when new videos are up and to claim your prize. Now let's go ahead and dive right in. Number 10, Samir White. This week's list is actually jammed packed with really good ads, and Samir White just barely made the list. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that White hasn't shown himself to be a high upside handcuff, because if Josh Jacobs is out, White would likely split work with Amir Abdullah, and Abdullah would receive the receiving work. And the Raiders are just flat out not a good team. It just doesn't bode well for a guy like Samir White. Josh Jacobs is elite, so he can be productive in a bad situation. Samir White, not so much. But White is young, and technically he hasn't gotten his shot to showcase as a lead back, so there is some unknown there. If Jacobs misses extended time and you can't grab one of the higher upside handcuffs, you can grab White. Number 9, Zay Jones. Trevor Lawrence played through a high ankle sprain, and while the final fantasy points were fine for Lawrence, it was a bad, messy game. Lawrence threw for volume, but was very off and completed just 28 of 50 passes and had 3 interceptions to go along with his 3 touchdowns. Because he was so inaccurate, the result was ugly stat lines for the Jags pass catchers outside of Evan Ingram. But Zay Jones actually led the team in targets with 14. On another day, in a better matchup with a healthier quarterback, those 14 targets are extremely valuable from a fantasy perspective. Christian Kirk is out for the remainder of the fantasy season. Targets will continue to flow Jones' way, and he's a solid roster. Number 8, Joe Flacco. We had multiple quarterback injuries this week, and streaming options at quarterback are getting slimmer and slimmer. The Browns named Joe Flacco the starting quarterback for the remainder of the season. In 2 games as the Browns starter, Flacco has thrown a total of 89 passes for 565 yards and 5 touchdowns with 2 interceptions. Not bad for a man literally signed off the street. Flacco's matchup against Chicago isn't ideal. Chicago's defense has been on the rise since their mid-season addition of Montez Sweat. But no streaming quarterback this week has an absolute layup matchup, so this week's quarterback ads are less about matchup and more about ability, stability, volume, and supporting cast. And now, Flacco has all of those and is a fine streaming option. Number 7, Jake Browning. Jake Browning is for real. Well, as real as you can get for a backup quarterback with 0 prior starting experience. It makes sense that Browning is thriving. Even though Jamar Chase had a subpar game, the team as a whole has enough talent to provide an ideal enough situation for any quarterback. Browning completed 18 of 24 attempts for 275 yards and 2 touchdowns and 1 interception, and he also got a rushing touchdown at the goal line. All of that was without a big game from Jamar Chase. That is a good sign. This week's matchup against Minnesota is definitely going to be more difficult than the past 2 weeks, but Browning's accuracy, decision-making, and strong supporting cast makes him a solid streaming option. Number 6, Chase Brown. It's playoff time. We have been stashing handcuffs heading into the playoffs, but there's one more that you need to add. Chase Brown. After having little impact and struggling with injuries throughout the season, rookie Chase Brown stepped up and he appears to have earned the handcuff role to Joe Mixon with a little bit of standalone value as well. Brown was a hot topic in the offseason when it was questionable whether the Bengals were moving on from Joe Mixon. Mixon ultimately took a pay cut and retained his job and has dominated workload throughout the entire season. But over the past 2 games since returning from IR, Brown has had a total of 17 carries for 86 yards, and in this past game, he also had 3 receptions for 80 yards and a touchdown. The receptions here was an excellent sign because Brown served as a 3-down back in college with receiving upside, so it's great to see that if Mixon goes down, Brown could slot into the role and have high-end RB2 upside. He is definitely worth a stash. Number 5, Isaiah Likeley. I've had Isaiah Likeley as my favorite waiver wire ad for tight ends for multiple weeks now, and I am thrilled that he finally showcased that upside, proving why I've been advocating for him. Likeley caught 5 of his 7 targets for 83 yards and 1 touchdown. Likeley might not be Mark Andrews, but he is the clear tight end 1 in an offense that ensures the tight end has a dominant role. And this week he gets Jacksonville, a team that is extremely vulnerable to the pass and just got lit up by David Njoku. Likeley is a strong streaming option with top 5 upside rest of season. Number 4, Rico Demps. Rico Demps had 12 carries for 46 yards and 1 touchdown on Sunday. Dowdle's usage isn't a lock for standalone value because the previous game he had just 5 carries. Since week 10, he's basically had off and on games jumping from around 10 fantasy points down to 3 fantasy points, so he isn't a consistent option, but he is the very, very clear handcuff with high upside here. This is exactly the type of running back that you want to roster heading into the fantasy playoffs. If you're in a very deep league and you suffer injuries at other running backs, Demps does offer the ability to be a spot start with standalone value. In other leagues, he is the perfect bench stash to hold and give you league-winning upside if something were to happen to Tony Pollard. Number 3, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon. I struggled narrowing down this list, so I cheated here and I grouped Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon together. McKinnon outscored CEH because he got the touchdown, but CEH did get the bulk of the carries with 11 compared to McKinnon's 4, and they both had involvement in the pass game. If Isaiah Pacheco misses more time, both CEH and McKinnon are viable starts. Pacheco didn't go on IR, but it does sound like this could be a multi-week absence. McKinnon is the safer option because we know that he would have standalone value on third downs even when Pacheco returns. CEH is the riskier ad here, but his usage was still encouraging. Number 2, Tai Chandler. Just when you thought you were out on Tai Chandler, he is back on the table with Alexander Madison's injury. At the time of filming this video, we don't know the severity to the injury, but if Madison misses time, Tai Chandler steps into the RB1 role, and while that role hasn't had a ton of upside this year, Chandler also offers receiving upside that would help push him into an RB2. I placed Chandler above the Chiefs running backs because Chandler would have the RB1 role for Minnesota outright here. Chandler had 12 carries for 35 yards and 3 receptions on 3 targets for 7 yards on Sunday, while the remaining backups had a total of just 3 carries. Chandler has shown upside and flashed on limited workload, and if he's the lead back, he gets Cincinnati, a good matchup. And if we get news that this ankle injury is a multi-week absence, next week's matchup against Detroit isn't ideal, but the championship week matchup is against Green Bay. That is an excellent matchup. Number 1, Dante Foreman. I am shocked that there is such a drastic difference in roster percentage between Dante Foreman and Khalil Herbert. Herbert is over 50% rostered in both Yahoo and ESPN leagues. Foreman is under 40% rostered in Yahoo leagues and under 30% rostered in ESPN leagues. It is very clear the Bears are moving forward with Foreman as their lead back. And it didn't look like a committee this week either. Foreman had 11 carries for 50 yards and 2 receptions on 3 targets for 22 yards. Herbert had just 3 carries for 8 yards. Roschon Johnson had just 1 carry for 6 yards. Foreman was the clear RB1 when Herbert was out and injured, and when Herbert returned, Foreman still operated as the lead back before quickly getting injured. Now he returns to health, and once again, he is the RB1. We've got more than enough definitive sample size here to say that Foreman is the lead back, and this will likely continue through the fantasy playoffs. You need to roster him. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And remember, if you want a chance to win a glorious fantasy football championship belt for your league, courtesy of our good friends at Trophy Smack, the #1 destination for epic fantasy football trophies, you need to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now. Drop a comment below on this video, and that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can know when new videos are up and to claim your prize.